And good afternoon, or I guess whatever time of day it is, wherever you are listening to this, because we're podcasting, not necessarily live, but we are live. And my name's John. I'm one of the speakers and apologists over at Stand to Reason. And no, I am not Greg. And some of you might be wishing I was, but I'm not. And that's okay. I understand, because I wish I was Greg sometimes too. But I do have the privilege to stand in for him today. And up front, I guess I'd like to give you the phone number to call in if you have any questions in the area of ethics, value, religion, of course, apologetics. I'd love to hear from you. And you can dial in at 855-243-9975, and I will do my absolute best to answer whatever question you might have for me. Again, that's 855-243-9975. And I thought that I'd start our time off today by asking you guys a question. Now, who here has a cell phone? Or more specifically, who here has a smartphone? Now, I do. My hand is raised. If you're watching the video, my hand is raised. I do have a smartphone. But something hit me recently. I recently took my family camping. And we aren't campers. This was actually our first time camping I've been married for almost 20 years. My oldest is 14. My youngest is 7. And I have never brought them camping. Maybe for good reason. They're all girls. I'm not saying anything about you girls out there. It's okay. I understand that there are girls who like to camp. Actually, I know a few of them, and they're better campers than me, but I've always been worried about it. But one of the things that surprised me is how well my kids did. We brought my 2 dogs, and we had a ball. And one of the best pats about camping is when we rolled up to the campsite, there was no Wi-Fi. And both my cell phone and my wife's cell phone had no service. And for the first 4 or 5 hours, it was pretty worrisome, actually. You have a nervous feeling. Well, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if somebody needs to reach me? But then you kind of get into the groove of it a little bit, and it became very, very comfortable. And I realized something. I have become entirely too dependent on this little device that sits in my pocket. In fact, I oftentimes feel it. Sometimes maybe you guys feel it. This as well. It's a phantom ring. It's that phantom buzz in your pocket that you feel the buzz like your phone's going off. It's vibrating, but it's not there. And it's really weird because these little devices have actually changed us. They've changed how we think. They've changed how we relate to each other. And in I think many ways, they've changed us for the good, but I think they've also changed us for the bad. And this is something that I've been really wrestling with recently, guys. And I'd love to hear what you have to think about this. And I'm not by any means, when I say something here, I want to let you guys know I'm not condemning perhaps your views of this. I just want to have the conversation because I've seen some effects. As some of you may know, I've been speaking a lot on suicide the last 5 years here at Stand to Reason. Every time I feel like I go out and speak, one of the topics they're requesting, these churches or conferences or schools, one of the topics they're requesting from me is suicide. Actually, 30% of the time I'm speaking on suicide. And as I dig further and further into the issue of mental health and suicide, certain things are becoming clear to me. And one of them is the impact of social media, these phones, these devices, screen time are having, not just on me and you, but also the youth, our kids. And like I said, I've got 4 daughters. I've got 14, 12, almost 11, and 7. So I'm right there in the throes and wrestling through this stuff. So I thought maybe I'd wrestle out loud. And I also feel the pressure. I just want to let you guys know this. I feel the pressure of the use of social media, right? I look at people like Tim Barnett, my colleague. He does Mr. B, Red Pen Logic, and he's hugely successful. I'm really good friends with Mike Winger. And his YouTube channel is just over the last 5 years just blown up. And he's doing a lot of great work. And all of this in the context of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and social media in general. So I feel the pull to go there, and especially professionally. Like maybe I mean I have a good message, I know that, and God's using me in the places that He's sending me, and my message is received well, especially about suicide. Maybe I should be spending more time online. But actually, Amy and I, right before I hopped on here live with you, we're talking about this just briefly, and she asked, like, are you pumping the show on your social media? And well, my response was, I don't really have any social media. And that's the truth. I haven't really been on social media the last 7 months intentionally, because I think we need to, as a culture and a society, put some brakes on social media. And part of the reason is, I think, the effects that screens and social media in particular are having on our culture and society. I don't think it's good. In fact, as you start digging into the research on this, and actually there's a great book out there by Jonathan Haidt. It's The Anxious Generation. I've read this along with another great book that's out there. It's called Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. Both of those authors you may recognize, because Abigail Schreier, she wrote another very, very popular book, Irreversible Damage. That was a couple years ago. And then Jonathan Haidt was the co-author of The Coddling of the American Mind, which is another fantastic book written back in 2019. But Haidt, in his book, The Anxious Generation, reveals and puts some numbers, some research to the idea that perhaps social media isn't so great for our kids, especially. Did you guys know, for example, the average time teenagers spend on their phones, on their devices, and specifically on social media, the average time per day? You're gonna call and yell at me and tell me I'm not telling you the truth, but this is in the book. 9 hours a day. 9 hours a day people are spending on social media and in front of their screens. And what's interesting, what I think is interesting, when you start looking at the trends in the culture and the mental health situations that we're running into now. In fact, we are in a net mental health low in this country. The Surgeon General, he would say actually that I just recently read an article over on CNN, and then the New York Times published it too. Our Surgeon General, he says the mental health crisis among young people is an emergency, and social media has emerged as an important contributor. And that's what Murthy says, our Surgeon General. And when you start looking at the numbers, it's absolutely horrifying what's happening. And so try to track with me here. Okay, so from 2005 to 2010, we saw a steady rise in mental health issues, meaning depression, anxiety, self-reported largely among the teenagers in our culture. And 12% of them, 12%, said that they had a major mental health crisis in the last year, according to the CDC. And then in 2011 to 2012, there was a huge spike, especially for girls. The boys were always lower and they jumped, but the girls jumped from 12% to 20%, that they experienced a severe mental health crisis. And then, so that's, and then in 2021, rates skyrocketed. COVID hit. And actually what's really interesting when you look at the numbers, COVID is actually just a little blip on the screen. When you look at the long term, we've seen steadily since the advent of cell phones. Well, Haidt says it's screens, it's high-speed internet access, unlimited data plans, these types of things. We're kind of increasing use of these devices without any regulation or any oversight on them, parental or governmental, I guess, but I'm going to speak mostly to the parents. We see mental health issues raised and now skyrocketing in this country. In 2021, rates skyrocketed to almost, so boys are at 12% experiencing a mental health crisis in the last year, and girls are now in 2021, 30% of our student age girls have experienced a mental health, what they expressed as a mental health crisis in the last year. And so it's with the advent of social media, these things like TikTok, especially TikTok, and it has really affected our youth. And you start seeing this research, and I'm thinking like, well, what can we do? And In the book, I think Haidt does a great job of, he gives us 4 principles, and I'm just going to briefly mention them, and I'm going to try to get to some callers, maybe after the first break in like 10 minutes. So if you're on the line, I just want to let you guys know, stay there with me, and I know I see you guys waiting, and I really appreciate you, and I will get to you. But Haidt, Haidt recommends 4 things. The first thing that he recommends is no smartphones before high school. And this is actually something that my family is following. We haven't given, now I'm about to have a freshman for the first time. We're breaking that high school boundary, but we are not giving my 14-year-old cell phone. And that's by choice. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. She will be the only person in her friend group who does not have one. She currently is. I remember our kids go to a fairly large now Christian school here locally where I live, and I remember dropping 2 of my girls off, my 2 middle schoolers off, for an event they had, and they were singing in a choral performance, and you have to check them in, and I checked them in, and the woman checking them in says, "Oh, they'll just text you when they're done, so then they can come find you and sit with you." And I said to the woman, I said, "Oh, my kids don't have a cell phone." And she looked at me like, I wish you guys could have seen it on her forehead, and said, like, "does not compute." Like, she just didn't get it, and she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Well, my kids, they don't have cell phones, so they can't text me. Like, don't worry about it." Actually, she ended up calling somebody over, like, "Hey, Marjorie, can you come over here? This guy here says his kids don't have cell phones, and I'm just like, "Don't worry about it. Like, my kids will be able to find me. We'll figure it out." For hundreds of years, we've been able to find our children in large crowds, and it was fine. But we're sticking to this. So my daughter, her last holdout friend, just for her birthday recently, got a cell phone and a smartphone. Now we're going to hold out, and we're going to see how long we can go. Maybe I'll get her a flip phone when she starts to drive. Haidt recommends this, and it's backed by his research. If you want, again, The Anxious Generation is the name of the book, and you guys can dig in. Or we can talk about it maybe a little bit after I get to some callers, see how we do there. The second thing that Haidt recommends is no social media till 16. And we were just kind of talking about social media and the pressures that I feel as a full-grown man to get on there. And what's really, really interesting is the effects that social media have had on our kids as we track it. It's advent, right? So smartphones came out. When was that? Like 2007, I think, is when the iPhone maybe came out. I could Google it real quick. But then as social media increases and different platforms pop up, we've seen nothing but a decline in the mental health, especially of our kids. You see, as our kids are going through puberty and they're developing as people, as human beings, they're discovering who they are. And when they're online all the time in these forums, these social media forums, and actually, I actually think the term social media is kind of an oxymoron. There's actually very little social about it these days, in my opinion. I think there's very little social. It's more antisocial. It's going on, especially the ones that you're swiping through. I've actually never been on TikTok, so I just don't know. But I've been on the YouTube Shorts, which I guess are probably just Instagram or something like that. And you swipe through, and all you're doing is consuming. And one of the things that social media does that I think is really, really interesting, and I just thought about this earlier today, and I was thinking about, well, should I mention it? Sure, why not? So social media, right? It's clearly there. The people who run these things, these are tech companies, and there are great engineers and minds behind them, and they create them for a reason. And I'm a realist, so I'm believing that the reason why they're doing it is because it's a product, right? So they have something to sell. They're making money. They're making a lot of money. And what makes I think social media really unique is not only does it encourage a consumeristic, I think, mentality, especially with the swipe stuff. It's just on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. But what's being sold? What is the commodity? What's being consumed? What's human beings? So I think social media is unique in that we are consumers, but people are also being consumed. They're the product. And then I think that this leads to the further objectification of human beings. In fact, I think I might have said it earlier at the onset, just the introduction of what I was going to say. I think in a large part, it's actually reduced our view of humanity. I think it becomes a lot easier for us to view people as a commodity because we spend 9 hours a day on social media, and it's being wired into us, which I think is really interesting. So the first is no smartphones before high school. The second is no social media till 16. If you're a parent of younger kids, I would love it if you'd weigh in. You can give me a call at 855-243-9975, or maybe you've been through this and you have some advice to me and you want to tell me how wrong I am. I would love to hear that too, because it would help some of the conversations that are going on in my house. So anyways, to protect our kids, Jonathan Haidt, in his book The Anxious Generation, he gives you 4 principles. One is no smartphones before high school, and 2 is no social media till 16. 3, and this is really, I think this is one of the most interesting because I'm actually living this right now. I'll explain that. It's phone-free school. Phone-free school. You see, and this is something I've been advocating for at my kids' schools for a long time. And next year, we just got an email. It's so cool. My 3 oldest, they go to a larger school. My youngest, she's still at like a little teeny tiny classical school. Actually, it's not so little anymore. It's tripled in size since we've been there. But the larger school, that's a high school and a middle school, next year they're banning cell phones, which is, for me, is so pleasing. And why is that? Well, cell phones are a distraction. Oftentimes, I don't know if you guys have hung out on a high school or college campus recently. I have. I go to college campuses often to talk. I'm actually doing some stuff for a documentary that's going to be coming out with Stand to Reason, and just kind of, we call it Noise on the Streets, where I'm just talking to people, it's incredible what you see. These kids, these students, faces down in their phones, almost every single one of them, almost zombified. Is that a word? Zombified? Amy will correct me, I'm sure. But they're like zombies. They're walking around like with their phones and not interacting, not being incarnation with each other. And the same thing in the high school. I had the opportunity to teach a bunch of debate classes this year at the high school. And when you're walking in the hallways, these kids are not interacting with each other. They're just walking past. I mean, they're saying hi and stuff like this, but not like I was, in high school, and they're just buried in their phones. Well, anyways, my kid's school has decided to ban cell phones, meaning the email just came out last week, and it gives kind of the rules that they're expecting people to follow. They can come to school, but they have to be powered off and left in their lockers. Nobody wants to see them, and they'll get confiscated if they do. And I think it's great, and it's actually backed by research here. There's a great article. There's a study that was done by the Norwegian Institute of Public Health that came out earlier in the year. Norway has banned cell phones in their schools. And listen to this, when they did this. The Norwegian, due to this study, they decided to take action, the Norwegian public schools, and they took cell phones out of their schools. And there's a couple main points that have come from the actual effects of no schools. First is that girls made fewer appointments for psychological help. The study found that there was a significant decrease in the number of visits that female students made to go see a psychologist or psychiatrist specifically for mental health issues, which is, and this is almost, these results are almost immediate. It hasn't been a decade. It's been a year. They've seen a steep drop in bullying. And this is especially among girls. The study shows that girls experienced a 46% reduction in bullying after these smartphones, they were banned. And boys, they experienced a 43%. So it's statistically pretty much the same. So there's girls made fewer appointments for psychological help. There's a steep drop in bullying across the board. And then what really surprised me, this is funny because I got all girls. So of course the girl stuff data pops out at me, right? But the third impact was that there's improved grades for girls, especially. Almost immediately, GPAs went through the roof, and so we're seeing all around an improvement when schools banned cell phones, which is phone-free schools. And the fourth thing is more independence and responsibility in the real world. So Haidt recommends, and now he does like he buys into the free range parenting. Some of you guys might know what that is. I'm not there yet, but like a good principle that Greg always taught me is you eat the meat, spit out the bones, right? So you digest the good stuff for you. And I don't love all the free range parenting, like kind of let your kids just go. But I do like the idea of giving our kids at younger ages more independence and responsibilities in the world. And one of the things that my wife and I talk about is oftentimes she'll bring up the fact, well, hey, but that the world is dangerous. What happens if our kids get taken? But the chances of that happen. Did you guys know that we live in a safer world for children? Like we live in a better world than we did than when I was young. I'll be 45 this summer, and sex predators, these sex crimes and on minors especially are all but done away with. I think we've done a good job at being proactive in our policing and sending a lot of our sexual predators to jail and into prison. So we're seeing less, at least reported incidents of these things. It's actually a safer world for our kids to live in. So we should be giving them maybe a little bit more independence and then also more responsibility. We're helping our kids. So what we're doing is we're taking certain things, I guess, away from them. We're maybe not allowing them to have access to social media as early as we want. But do we really want our teens growing up allowing social media to form who they are, especially through the lens of social media? Then what's going on there? I don't think so. So we might be limiting them in certain ways, but it's because we love them. And then we want to be giving them more independence, helping them find that first job whenever they can. One of the benefits that Haidt actually points out in his book, one of the great things to do is give your kid a responsibility over other kids. Right. So babysitting or be a camp counselor. One of the things that my oldest daughter does every summer, and this is her second summer doing it, is that she does a day camp. She puts together with her friends. She's 14. She has her and her three friends. They put together Happy Summers summer camp. That's what they called it. They have a logo and everything. And I don't do anything. I don't help them at all. They do this all on their own. And they had this last week. It's 3 days from 9 to 1. They had 26 young ones that came and got dropped off. It's like a daycare, I guess, just for 3 days. And they made a fortune, but this is responsibility. And think about what's being offered to my daughter and her friends, right? They're getting leadership experience. They're getting organizational leadership experience. They're learning how to operate with money and within a team and a system. And then they're also caring for other people's children at the same time. And it's helping them grow, and I think that if we follow some of these things and we start being a little bit more proactive with our kids, protecting them, maybe, I think that we could see a turnaround in the culture. And my job, I would love it if I got worked out of a job. I would love it if one of my prayers is every time I go to speak on suicide, whether it be at Summit or at Reality Conference or wherever I'm speaking, or if maybe one of your churches brought me out, one of my prayers is that nobody would show up. And I would love to live in that world where we're dealing with mental health and suicide isn't an issue in the culture, but unfortunately it's not. And I understand that it's a long road. I understand, but it's going to take a societal effort. And we're all going to have to join together and kind of make this stuff happen. And I was talking to somebody recently, like, well, that never happens. It doesn't sound probable, especially as it's like it takes a collective action, right? Is what Haidt says. Collective action. The culture has to come here. It has to be 70% of the culture has to experience a shift and lead the change. They'll never happen. 70%. No way. It's not going to happen. But we've seen large scale change happen according to a collective action, right? For example, do you guys remember smoking cigarettes? I mean, do you guys remember walking into a restaurant and being asked, hey, do you want to sit in smoking or non-smoking? I do. I remember that. I remember walking to restaurants and stinking like smoke. Some of you listening might remember. Do you guys remember smoking on airplanes? I mean, I can't even imagine that now. But within my lifetime, that became, not just taboo, but now illegal. And this is because there was a collective action, a social collective happened where we gather around and I understand, like if you listen to Dennis Prager and stuff, these things like our views of smoking, what the government says about it, whatever. All I know is that there's been a change, and I think it's been a beneficial change for the large part. Cigarettes are now, I mean, people still smoke, and it's not illegal to smoke, but we've taken action as a society against it, or consumption of junk foods, for example. Did you guys know? I just recently read it was actually mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewing Height. They mentioned that obesity is down. So then I looked it up and it's down. Obesity is down in this country. Why? Well, because these junk food companies, they did a great job advertising and making food taste as best as it possibly can. Everything down to how crispy a chip is going to be. There's a science, literally a science down to this, how a bag looked on the shelf, where it was placed, what a level according to its eye level or not, enticing people to eat this stuff, and it wasn't good for you. So now we live in a time where we're realizing, hey, you know what? As a culture, some of this stuff, it's not bad in that it's immoral to eat a bag of chips, but it might not be good for you. I love chips, and oh my gosh, I love sour candy. That's my stuff. But I also understand it's not good for you. So I'm going to limit my intake. And I think there's been a collective kind of going around in fitness, certainly here in Southern California, maybe we're unique, but obesity is down across the board. So I think the culture can change and we can follow these principles. And in the process, what happens is our youth, because this is something that we can all agree about, right? We can all agree that our youth are important. Greg says it so well, right? That the most important generation is always the next generation. The important generation is always the next generation. So our youth is the most important thing. So why are we experimenting with this stuff, this social media stuff with our youth? And it's become such an issue. I mentioned the Surgeon General earlier, but if you guys look it up, there's a great article in the New York Times I briefly mentioned, but and you can find the information elsewhere, and all major publications online will have it. But the Surgeon General is actually asking Congress to place limiters on social media use, and he's trying to up the age to make it a law that you have to be 16 or older to access these places. And why? Well, because there's a detrimental effect. So I'm just hoping that we can come around each other and join as a team, I guess, in helping our youth thrive. Because right now, I'll tell you from personal experience, guys, I know it because I travel all over the world now talking on issues of suicide and mental health. 30% of the time I'm gone, I'm speaking on this. Our kids are hurting, and it's not a problem that's unsolvable. It's not even that complicated. That's what I tell people sometimes. I say, I've got nothing complicated. I've just got something difficult to tell you. And maybe we could take these things. So, okay, with that, guys, I think I flew through our first break, which isn't surprising. But I'd love to maybe dig into our first question here on line one. We've got Thomas on line one. So, Thomas, are you there with us, or did I go too long?
No, I'm still here.
Awesome, Thomas. How you doing, man?
Great. Thank you.
What do you got for me? Something easy.
Well, first I want to thank you for filling in for Greg, give him time off, and also for everything you do and stuff, and you're speaking and stuff on a very delicate and important subject. And
praise
yes,
God, man.
I am talking on a smartphone right now to you, so I'm guilty.
Well, we all are, and that's why I started by saying I'm not meaning to condemn any. Right? There's now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
I know. I'm just playing with you.
Yeah.
One, it is it's alongside, like in the Bible, sometimes it doesn't come out with things specifically, but sometimes you can draw conclusions to things, and sometimes not. Like, for instance, in the Trinity, it doesn't come out and exclusively say the Trinity, the God's Trinity, the Triune God, but
sure,
from passages here and there and stuff, you kind of piece it together and figure it out. And I've had a long thing about angels. They got there's a league of angels, and some followed Satan and fell away. Of course, the good angels, they're still there and stuff and doing what they're supposed to do and stuff, and nothing wrong or anything, and nothing bad's going to happen to them, of course. But but there's penalty for the other ones, and God chose to, He's a just God, so there's going to be a penalty for it, and we know what that is. But then there's us, and we're a little bit different, as we're made in God's image and stuff, but we're fallen creatures also. But He provided a redemption for us. He didn't have to, but He wanted to, and at a great cost of using His Son. And I was wondering why He chose to redeem us when he didn't have to. He didn't need to. He doesn't need us. He wants us. But you know what I mean? But
yeah, I mean, Thomas, what a fantastic question. This is something I wrestle with all the time too. I mean, because I don't know you, and you don't know me really. Maybe someday we'll get to meet each other. But like when I survey my life before I was Christian, before I was chosen, right before God introduced Himself to me, I was a horrible human being. Like, there's nothing special about me. Like, why would God choose me? And then then this is. It's such a great question to wrestle with. And Ephesians comes to my mind, so Ephesians 1:4 says he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. And if you keep on reading Ephesians 1, it says, in love, he predestined us for adoption to the sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. He chose us not because of anything we bring to the table. He chose us out of his love and mercy and ultimately for his own glory. And I remember when I first became a Christian, that made no sense to me, because we live in a culture and a time where I feel like oftentimes we want to bring stuff to the table, right? We are in a performance driven culture. And we see that with social media. I was just talking about it, right? And
right.
I think we've been heavily influenced by naturalism in this regard. I think that largely we like to we like to find our satisfaction or our justification for even being in the things that we possess, whether it be a beautiful wife or a really nice car or a nice house or even how well our kids are behaved or anything, and this is how we like to judge ourselves, but that's not how God judges us. He didn't choose us because we've done anything. He merely chose us because he loves us. And then he chose us for a reason, right? So he, in John, so Jesus says in John 15, he says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you, right? So we're told, 2 Corinthians 5:20, right? We're ambassadors for Christ, begging on behalf of Christ to be reconciled to God. And so while God chose us, not for anything that we bring to the table, but merely because he loves us and for his glory, he also chose us for a purpose. And this is the beautiful thing, I think, about the plan that God has, right? God has chosen you, Thomas, and me, John, fallen, broken human beings, frail jars of clay. But we are in the potter's hands, and he's constantly forming us, mailing us into what he wants us to be, and the light of his gospel shines out through us into the world. He uses us, Thomas, in his master plan, and we are his plan A, which is insane. Does that help answer your question?
And it reminds me of a book I read a long time ago. I think it was by David Tripp. You ever heard of him?
I love Tripp. Yeah,
I think it was him that wrote this book, but Instruments in the Redeemer's Hand.
Yeah, fantastic book.
Where he talks something about that, where even though we're broken stuff, he uses us as his tool. He doesn't need to. He has, of course, unlimited power and stuff to do what he wants and stuff, but he chooses to use us as his instruments to work out his plans here on earth.
Absolutely. And we're his first choice. There's no plan B. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just really, I think it's amazing when you start contemplating the wondrous grace of God and our position, why he would choose us, and it's because he loves us. There's no other reason, and it's because it's for his glory, and then in his love and in his glory, we can now do works for God, but it's not because of our works, right? That Paul is very, very clear on that. We've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death, right? And it's not of good works, so that no man may boast, is what Paul says. But it doesn't mean that God doesn't use us to those good works. Right. So that's a great question, Thomas. I appreciate you giving us a call today, man. Thanks for waiting for so long too. You're the most patient person I've met today.
Well, thanks
Thank
for
you,
all
bud.
you do and stuff, okay?
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thanks for the encouragement too. And you know what? We got 6 minutes before a break, so let's try to take this next question from Austin in Anaheim, and see what's going on here. Hey, Austin, are you still there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey, how's it going today, man?
I appreciate the topic with Jonathan Haidt. And yeah, I'm a high school teacher, so I can relate.
It's crazy.
Banned. We had cell phones banned in my school, and then parents started complaining. So the district actually allowed the kids to have them again. We got smacked down by the district. Isn't that crazy?
What's been really interesting in the research that I've been doing. Parents are actually a major part of the problem, because it's the parents who are like, well, wait, I need to be in contact with my kid. And oftentimes it's the parents who are texting their kids like in the middle of the school day, and I'm not trying to condemn people for doing this. It's just, I'm trying to point it out that like, well, maybe your kids maybe the reason why they're not getting pre-algebra is because their phone's going off or the text popping up in their computer. I mean, nowadays, at least my kids' textbooks, they're all electronic, even their math textbook. So my kids are on a screen, they're on a computer almost all day. And if we had texting linked up to their computer and we were texting them during the day, I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to concentrate. LAUSD has actually taken that up again. I don't know if you're Anaheim. Is that LA or is that Orange County?
Well, I was teaching Torrance Unified, so that's LA County.
Okay.
And it was great. It was great with the cell phone ban, and then they started allowing it. I was like, But the kids are calm. The funny thing is the kids, no problem. When they're on their cell phones, no problem. They're not fighting with each other. Well, it's a pacifier. They're not cussing in the class. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's also part of the reason why, and I'm guilty, guys, like, Austin, everybody listening, like my confession to you right now is if I'm home alone, like Rhiannon's at work, my wife, she's at work, and I've got my 7-year-old home, and I really need to get that blog done for Amy to post, guess what I'm giving my 7-year-old, man? I'm giving her my cell phone because it's a pacifier. And I'm not saying it's all bad either, but I also see the effects of it. I see anyways, there's a whole nother conversation to have about dopamine being released and the rewiring that it's actually doing to our brains, physiologically changing us. But I have a feeling that that's not why you called, Austin. What can we wrestle with?
Okay, so the question after the missionary couple, like the 21, 23-year-old missionary couple was killed in Haiti, there was some debate on Twitter over whether that was right of them to even be there, especially the guy, to bring his wife into a place like Haiti. So my question is, and I'll drop a few verses, I'll just mention them, because I've been thinking about a few verses. My question is, do we still have a responsibility to preach the gospel to nations that have already been reached? And was it wise for this guy to bring his wife into Haiti? So I was thinking of Mark 6:16-15, go into all the world, preach the gospel. Mark 6:11 says, shake the dust off your feet if the gospel is not accepted there. And, I know it's reached Haiti, but it's not really accepted there. So I wonder if we should just leave these countries and stop spending money or sending money to these countries. And then as far as the guy and his wife, 1 Timothy 5:8, if anyone doesn't provide for his relatives, it says something like regard him as an unbeliever. And then kind of going back to the first point, I had another verse, Mark 12:31, love your neighbor as yourself. And I've heard pastors say loving your neighbor is actually your neighbor, not some foreign country. It's actually your neighbor. So is it loving our neighbor to send a bunch of money to other countries? So that's kind of my question. I know it's kind of a lot, but I hope you understand.
It's a really good question. My mind immediately, I think all the verses that you brought up are really good. One, context matters. Of course, context is king.
Sure.
Never read a Bible verse is the way we say it at Stand to Reason. But the verse that comes to my mind is Matthew 28, right? Of course, Matthew 28, 18-20, right? Go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them into the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded. That's a great commission. So another way that I would rephrase the question that you're asking me is I would say, when is it appropriate to not do the Great Commission anymore? When do we stop? My answer would be when Jesus comes back, right? It's not go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the Father, Son, and so on and so forth, unless it gets really, really difficult, or unless you're in harm's way, or you made a mistake by bringing your wife. Now, to your question about this missionary in particular, whether it was appropriate for him, I have no idea. You know, it's funny. I'm in a marriage, so my wife is probably the most amazing person I've ever met in my life. She's incredible, and I love her more than I could ever say. She is not a missionary. Like sometimes I'll come home from work, or I'll be just deep in study and so affected by the gospel, by whatever it is I'm working on. And I'll come, this really happens, Austin. Like I'll come upstairs from my office that's in my garage, and I'll say, "Hey babe, we got to sell it all." I'm going full Francis Chan on her. You know what I mean? Like we have to sell it all and just go. And she looks at me with these big eyes and is like, yeah, not going to happen. Like that's not who we are. So if I were to enter the mission field, I would probably have to make the decision, a lot of missionaries, right? I would do it apart from my family, but that's because I would have to survey the situation myself. And I don't think there's a biblical mandate or a biblical instruction on whether I should take my wife or not. So I can't answer. My point is I can't answer the question about this gentleman, this missionary who abroad. So I actually haven't heard anything about it. See, I'm not on social media, and I don't want to read the news. So I'm completely ignorant stuff. Did he where did he go and where did he die? Or did his wife die?
Yeah, he went to Haiti, and the missionary director was killed, and then him and his young wife. I mean, they're both young. They were killed, and the rumor is they were cannibalized. I don't know if that's true as well.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah,
but I think just because horrible things happen to missionaries definitely isn't an excuse to stop evangelizing because of the Great Commission. Right. The Great Commission, I think, commands us, even if a country has been, I'm using air quotes, evangelized. I mean, you and I, even as I'm assuming you're a Christian, Austin, because you're calling me and you also have this type of question, right? You and I need to be not evangelized in that we're not believers, but we need to hear the gospel every week. Right. I think sometimes we have this idea that the gospel is this thing that we preach to people until they're saved. And then we stop preaching it. No. The gospel is the good news that you and we need to hear every single week. And that's why I think church is so important. So even if a Christian even if a nation has been evangelized, and I think it's still important that we as the church collective help grow the Christian worldview within the context of that culture. In appropriate means, of course. Now, the other verses about, shaking the dust off our feet and things like this, I think that we have to look at those verses, each one in their context. And I have a feeling that they have more to do, and I'm not turning to them right now. We can if, I'm already 2 minutes over my break. I'm going to miss all my breaks. But I have a feeling that they have to do with individual instances, not specific missionary efforts to parts of the world. So this is a great example, actually. My family, none of my family are Christian. My brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, they're not Christians. They are, my brother and my sister in particular are very aggressive atheists. At what point do I stop preaching the gospel or sharing the Jesus with my family? I don't think ever. I am going to do it till the day I die or the day they die or Jesus comes back, whichever one comes first, because it's that important, So, I'm not going to shake the dust off of my sandals for this one. Now, certain instances, it's interesting. I was just starting the preparation for, I'm preaching at my church this weekend in Luke. And, I'm thinking it's Luke 10, where it's a similar instruction, right? Jesus, he said he's going to send out I think it's the 40 he sends out, and they actually have really good results, which is a good thing. But it's similar instruction that if you go to a house and they feed you, stay there. A worker's due his wages is where we get that saying from, because you're doing good work and they accept you into the house. Now, if they don't accept you, move on. I just think it's practical advice. Don't stay someplace where you're getting beat up. Move on. But I don't think that we can apply that specific verse to a global mission effort. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah, it does. Yeah, you answered the first question, because I was wondering, when do we ever stop? And you're saying we don't.
Never.
So we don't stop.
Well,
okay.
Not until Jesus comes back. You
Got
know.
It.
I mean, again, I have on my arm, I have tattooed 2 Corinthians 5:20. That was the first tattoo I ever got. I got it Father's Day like 10 years ago. And I love that verse because we're ambassadors for Christ. And this is the way maybe it's because of where I come from, Austin, right? I lived so long on the other side of Jesus and as an atheist. And I grew up in a sea of atheists. And I just have such an appreciation for him that I'm never going to stop preaching Christ. And I think that we have biblical precedent through the apostles and the disciples. I mean, Paul never stopped, right? Acts, I mean, we can't stop preaching Christ. Never, because we fear God more than man. And until Christ comes back, because once Christ comes back, there won't be the need to preach Christ in an evangelistic effort anymore. But they'll still be preaching, I hope, man. I can't wait to hear Jesus preach. I'm looking forward to that perfect sermon. So, yeah. But I think it's a good question, Austin. But don't ever stop.
I appreciate it.
Does that help?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate that.
Of course.
And you know what? I don't know if it's too late to take a break. I think, can we take a break? We're going to take a 2-minute break, and then we come back. I got some announcements for you, and then we'll see what happens. You can give me calls, or we could talk more about mental health stuff and suicide. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes. Thanks for listening, guys. And just like that, we're back together. You and me. I'm John. This is Stand to Reason's podcast that you're listening to. I understand the confusion. If you're sitting there and you just joined us, you're like, this is not Greg. It's not. It's me. It's John. But we miss Greg, but it's good that he has some time off and enjoying his time away. There's a few announcements that I'm told that I have to give from Hamini. Hamini is our social media director, and if I don't give these announcements, she says I no longer have a job, and I love where I work, and I love the people I work with. So I just want to let you guys know that we are super stoked, and if you're a listener of this podcast and a follower of Stand to Reason, you already know this, I'm sure of it, but we have the theme and the dates to our next Reality Student Apologetics Conference, and I am so excited. We're going to be working alongside folks. I don't know, this guy, Jay Warner Wallace, you might have heard of him. Jason Jimenez, Megan Ullman, all of them are going to be participating with us as we travel to 6 locations this season, or 5 locations I have right here in front of me. Make sure you check out the dates for them and get your tickets, because most of them, I think all of the ones on the list here, all of them sell out. So we've got Los Angeles, September 13th and 14th, Seattle, October 18th and 19th, Minneapolis, which is our biggest one, is November 8th and 9th. Minneapolis in November? Yikes. Anyways, Dallas, Texas, February 21st and 22nd, and then Philadelphia, and that's March 21st and 22nd. Make sure you sign up and get your tickets at realityapologetics.com. You do not want to miss this. It's a lot of fun. Check out the website, by the way. I'm going to leave you there for the theme. It's really fun. It's super 70s. You're going to love it. Also coming up, we just want to get material into you guys' hands, and we've got 2 new courses coming next month in July to STRU. This guy, Robbie Lashua, he's unbelievable. He's not only a fantastic Christian apologist, but he's a really good friend. He's actually teaching, he's already recorded it. I think it's in post-production. It's getting ready to load to the website at STRU on New Testament canon. Which books are scripture and why? And then also we're partnering. This is actually a really exciting announcement. We're partnering with the John 10:10 Project and Illustra Media to present Lee Strobel's The Case for the Creator. We're going to include that in our STRU catalog. And I got to stress this, guys, this is free. We're not asking anything from you. We just want to walk with you and help tackle the most difficult issues that our culture is throwing at us as Christians. So make sure you go to training.str.org, sign up for free, and look for those 2 new things coming in July. Robbie's new course, on Canon, and Lee Strobel's The Case for the Creator with Illustra Media and John 1010 Project. Also, hey guys, if you like what you're hearing from us and you'd like to bring us live to your church in person, any of the speakers, me, Greg, Alan, Tim, Robbie, we'd love to join you. It's a lot of fun meeting you guys in the flesh, incarnationally, face to face. So we'd love to. Go to str.org and you can go to our events page. And so it's str.org/events. And you can see all our information, where we're speaking, or you can also email Darcy at booking@str.org to bring any of us to wherever you're at and speak on any number of topics. It's a lot of fun. And then I get to meet you face to face, which is my favorite part, is being with you, with people. And you also heard Greg, STR Asks, hashtag STR Asks for your question. If you have any questions that aren't being answered here today, please, send them via hashtag STR Asks, or ask, no S on the end, STRASK, hashtag STRASK. And Amy and Greg will answer them for you. And let's see here. Oh my gosh, Outposts. This is the last one, guys. Outposts. We have like 110 more now, I think. Outposts all over the world. We've got like 5 different countries represented. We have 115. I need to keep reading. 115 outposts. We have them in Canada, England, Australia, Ireland, Zambia, Portugal, in the United States. We've got 33 different U.S. states involved in this. These are our local kind of arms into the local church. These are outposts, and they're run by you. And we're accepting new director applications. You can submit one by going to str.org/outposts. And it's going to be, this is incredible what's happening. And I'm actually trying to get through the paperwork to start one in my neck of the woods too. I know Alan does one, and they're fantastic. So with that, that's the announcements. I've got 7 minutes. What should we talk about? I want to go back to the mental health stuff and kind of ask the question, what can we be doing? We discussed that briefly. I gave 4 principles that Haidt explains in his book, The Anxious Generation. A complimentary book that I recommended at the beginning, but I'm hoping that you guys pick up is Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy: Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up. It's I think a very decent book, and she explains the current models of therapy and why maybe they're not working, and we're seeing as Haidt says, an anxious generation. Before I mentioned that there's these 4 principles at the middle of the show, that Haidt mentions in his book to help things along, right? No smartphones before high school, no social media at 16, phone-free school, which I was just on the phone with an educator, Austin, who actually was happy that they got rid of the phones and then they brought them back. And actually LAUSD is, from what I read just briefly before this show, it seems like that is still on the table as far as LAUSD. So the public schools here in LA County, they're about to vote. The school board's about to vote on phones, and then more independence and responsibility is the 4th one. It's interesting. I mentioned just briefly, it's another topic on my mind about as we give our kids these phones and they're swiping up or whatever it is that they're watching or doing, they're unseen effects. And some of those unseen effects are this idea of dopamine being released. The dopamine's the pleasure drug, and I actually see it in my kids. Maybe you guys have seen it in your kids where you give them the device and they just go into this portal. They're completely gone. They're in their own little world. Well, it's because there's sensories, their dopamine sensories are firing left and right all over the place, and there's pleasure in that. And one of the things I heard from Joe Rogan, I thought was really interesting. I'm not a huge Joe Rogan guy. This is actually, I think, the first one of his podcasts I ever listened to was when he was interviewing Haidt. He mentioned it's maybe not that bad because people will just be walking around and they'll be less aggressive, and we see that. We see certain behaviors in kids are manifesting because they're being ultimately drugged by internally. It's natural. It's biological. It's happening as a stimulus. The phone is a stimulus, and this drug's being released in their brains and not being given something. But generally speaking, violent crimes and things like this will start to wane and stuff. We see it in, for example, unwanted pregnancies, for example. Unwanted pregnancies are way down. Well, why is that? Well, because kids and teens and adults, they're instead of seeking a real life partner, they're going online for their satisfaction, and they're getting addicted to this stuff. So there are certain things that are happening. But then also, like, think about it. And Joe Rogan pointed this out, and I thought it was a really good point. And I'll leave it with this kind of as we wrap up the show in the next 4 minutes. But imagine living in a world where we're all just kind of doped up on our own internal drugs. We're going to get rid of all the sad songs. We're going to get rid of all the hard things. And sometimes I feel like we think that that's a good thing. But there's a lot there in the struggle for us, guys. And I want to say, if you're struggling with any of this, there's help out there for you. If you're being affected mentally, or you're wrestling with the culture around you, talk to somebody. Get off of your phones and put them down and call somebody, or better yet, just go over their house or talk to a counselor or a pastor or friends, because there's a lot of people who want to help you. I know I'm one of them, and I'd love to meet you if that ever happens. So guys, hey, you know what? This was a fantastic hour. I am so honored that you would spend time with me today. And this is Stand to Reason. I'm John Noyes, and Greg will be back soon, but I hope this was enough. Thanks very much, guys.